The FIA has announced plans to tackle porpoising in Formula One, a problem that has been causing considerable discomfort for drivers, particularly after the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Following the race in Baku, several drivers, including Lewis Hamilton, expressed concerns over back pain, urging the FIA to intervene. Esteban Ocon pointed out that support for this move was growing among drivers. In response, the FIA confirmed on Thursday afternoon that they would step in to address safety concerns and improve the situation. After consultations with doctors and gathering feedback from drivers over the course of the weekend, the FIA decided to implement changes aimed at reducing or completely eliminating porpoising. So what's the FIA's strategy for addressing porpoising? Ahead of the Canadian Grand Prix, the FIA released a technical directive outlining the steps they intend to take. These measures include increased scrutiny on undercar planks and skids, focusing on both their design and wear patterns. Additionally, they're introducing a new metric based on vertical acceleration to quantify acceptable levels of vertical oscillation. The formula for this metric is still being reviewed, with input from Formula One teams before the action in Montreal begins. A technical conference will also be held with the teams to define specific actions that will reduce cars' tendency to bounce, particularly in the medium term. In the long run, the FIA intends to implement a system based on vertical acceleration that will set clear limits on acceptable bouncing. The scrutiny on undercar planks and skids will intensify, with a closer look at both their design and wear. Teams like Mercedes and Ferrari, which have been dealing with extreme bouncing, could face significant challenges under these new regulations. They will no longer be able to set up their cars in ways that result in excessive bouncing, despite those setups sometimes offering better performance. On the other hand, teams like Red Bull, which haven't been affected as severely by porpoising, won't need to make major adjustments. Their advantage could grow even more as a result. So what can teams do to minimize porpoising and stay compliant? With the new rules, the simplest solution is to raise the car's ride height. By doing this, the car is positioned higher off the ground, which reduces the chances of it bottoming out due to downforce. However, this adjustment comes with a downside. A higher ride height reduces the car's ground effect, meaning less downforce and ultimately slower lap times. As a result, many teams have been pushing their cars as low to the ground as possible to maximize performance. But with the FIA's new guidelines, Ferrari, Mercedes, and other teams facing extreme bouncing may have to raise their ride heights, potentially sacrificing speed. The FIA has already stated that it will be inspecting undercar planks and skids for wear caused by high-speed bouncing. Teams that are dealing with excessive porpoising, like Mercedes and Ferrari, may be forced to adjust their setups, which could negatively impact their performance. This is expected to give teams like Red Bull, which haven't been affected by porpoising, an even greater edge. However, the exact methods the FIA will use to combat porpoising are still being finalized. What's certain is that teams will have to comply with these new rules ahead of the Canadian Grand Prix, with immediate consequences for anyone who doesn't follow them. The FIA is taking a firm stance on this issue, with the risk of disqualification for those who fail to comply. To monitor porpoising in future races, the FIA will be using an aerodynamic oscillation metric, AOM, which will be calculated using accelerometers already installed in Formula One cars. These sensors are capable of detecting vertical oscillations, among other things. The data from these sensors will help the FIA determine if a car is bouncing excessively or frequently, and if that makes racing unsafe. Teams will need to calculate their AOM based on 3 laps during FP3, Free Practice 3. Once the AOM is determined, setup decisions such as ride height, vertical stiffness, and aerodynamic configurations will be locked in for the rest of the weekend, with only a few exceptions. If a team's car fails to meet the FIA's standards, they will have to raise the ride height by at least 10 millimeters. These new rules pose a significant challenge for teams like Mercedes and Ferrari, who have been struggling with porpoising. Raising the ride height to comply with the new regulations will likely cost them precious performance, meaning they could fall further behind teams like Red Bull, which aren't experiencing the same issues. However, the FIA is allowing some flexibility for the Canadian Grand Prix weekend due to the tight timeline for teams to make the necessary adjustments. For this weekend only, teams may be able to reinforce the floor of their cars with additional stiffening stays or make other modifications that would typically be deemed illegal. This gives teams like Mercedes and Ferrari a chance to improve their setups and reduce bouncing, while still maintaining some performance. This temporary leniency in Montreal could give Mercedes and Ferrari a much-needed boost, allowing them to improve their pace without worrying about breaking the rules for this race weekend. However, if these adjustments prove effective, the FIA may adopt them permanently, subject to approval from the World Motorsport Council later this year. For teams like Red Bull, which aren't facing the same bouncing problems, the upcoming changes could make their advantage even more pronounced. As the season progresses, it will be interesting to see how these new regulations play out and whether they can create a more level playing field. What do you think? Will these new measures help solve the purposing issue, or will they just create new challenges? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and stay tuned for more updates as the season unfolds.